You're listening to Autumn on the Air, the weekly podcast that brings you conversations about the impact of research commercialization and the people who make it happen. Join us for interviews with patent and licensing professionals, innovators, entrepreneurs, and tech transfer leaders on the issues and trends that matter most. Keep listening for an inside track on the people, IP policies, and politics changing our world.
Welcome to Autumn on the Air. When we talk about tech transfer, we usually focus on protecting intellectual property, licensing that IP, and then moving it into the marketplace. But what if the way we structure ownership and access to IP is only one version of what's potentially possible? Today's conversation steps slightly outside of the traditional playbook. My guests are Chris Hack and Dr. Geoffrey Smith, co-founder of Brilliance, a company focused on making intellectual property more accessible, understandable, and investable. Chris and Geoffrey work at the intersection of AI, blockchain, and decentralized finance, building tools designed to help more people explore patents, understand ownership structures, and rethink how innovation can be financed and shared. Welcome to the podcast, Chris and Geoffrey. So excited to welcome you here on the air.
Lisa, thank you so much. We're really excited to be here. This is a great opportunity, and we're excited to get talking.
Absolutely. Excited to be here.
Excellent. Well, we're excited to have you guys here. And so I thought the best place to start the podcast was just with kind of a general question, because you talk about democratizing innovation. Chris, can you talk to us about what that really means in practical terms?
Right. So it means more about for whom than what. And we're really focused on making IP accessible to everyday people so they can find it, they can understand it, they can participate in it. We start with patents as something that we are focused on because they're most visible, but the idea extends to all different types of intellectual property. And we treat intellectual property as a building block for society. You know, it's not a specific asset class reserved for specialists, but it should be more broadly accessible.
So when you look at the current IP ecosystem, where do you see friction or barriers that technology could realistically improve?
Yeah, and I think when we think about it from the perspective of the everyday person, the challenges are patents are really difficult to read, hard to find, and hard to value. In addition to that, the everyday person just doesn't understand much about like the core focus of the technologies that are described in the patents. And so because of that, IP tends to fall into like pockets, and it's also expensive to create. So capital access is another constraint. We think technology can help here. It can enable things like peer-to-peer capital formation using IP as collateral. But the bigger aim is to get just more money into the IP ecosystem by enabling and empowering more potential investors to be interested in the assets, to understand them, and get involved.
Just to add to that, you know, there's discovery friction, as you mentioned, as well as translation friction, but also there's matching friction. University partners want partners and companies want solutions. So there needs to be a way to bring them together. And there's an opportunity here.
Yeah, really interested to talk about that a little bit more, because I know you've built generative AI tools to enhance patent exploration. What problem were you trying to solve? And talk to us a little bit about the tools you've developed.
Yeah, and so to build off of what Geoffrey said, you know, it's the problem haver, problem solver, problem to solve, which is the matching of people who have issues and people who are able to solve them. And also, I think it's about finding the IP that an individual is looking for. So we use AI to help with this. And like I said, like our focus when we bring the AI tools in, because we know that there's plenty of AI tools within like the patent professional sphere. But outside of that, we're really focusing on, okay, if you're going to expand the footprint of investors, we have to give them the tools and knowledge to be able to navigate this. And so that means that AI helps them understand commercial applications of IP. So it's a very simple application of an LLM can help you take a patent and maybe frame it in a commercial setting. And in addition to that, it helps them find what they're looking for. So they can use a natural word search, for example, in one of the AI tools that we have, just to kind of match and find the type of technologies they may be looking for, so that they don't need a patent professional, at least for that first pass.
So to be clear, it's not a patent drafting tool, which there are a lot of. I'm a patent attorney. I've played with a lot of them. So it's a very different focus, and helping someone in a tech transfer office maybe doing a quick and dirty kind of provisional type of thing.
No, not at all.
Yeah. It sounds like you found a really interesting niche that a lot of companies haven't realized or stumbled upon yet.
Yeah, we're trying to increase the pie. And that's the idea, right? So innovation will flourish if more people are thinking about it like they think about real estate.
Exactly.
And that's the conversation we want people to have at home. Like, I think, and we had a earlier opportunity to engage the audience, and we asked the question, how many people know somebody close to them who doesn't know what IP is? And most people raised their hands, and myself included. And so I think success would look like getting my parents and my close friends as comfortable with the conversation around intellectual property as they do right now with real estate.
Yeah, that would be really, really helpful. I mean, I think that would just spark a lot of innovation if more people knew what IP was all about. So I'm totally with you there. And, many tech transfer professionals already use a number of different patent databases daily. What does AI meaningfully change, and what does it not change?
Broadly, I think AI has a massive impact on the IP landscape. And I think you've mentioned patent professionals using patenting tools, drafting tools, and things to make their workflows easier. When we talk about our impact, I think it's there is an indirect impact here. So the more people who understand the intellectual property, the more exposure existing intellectual property gets. So I think for us, our AI helps expand exposure of the assets and creates a new buyer class. And that's what we're really looking for here. So we see some universities are looking for entrepreneurs to come in. And this is what these entrepreneurs are generally tied to investors, or they may be accredited investors themselves. And so this is a tool for them. They come in and say, okay, which universities have which technologies? We're trying to, and so just as an aside, one of the things that we do is we will list university intellectual property on our site for free. And the reason for that is it powers and feeds into our AI model. So if someone like an investor is working with us and they want to know more about other technologies, this is where they'll go. They'll use our AI model, and the AI model will tell them what else we have. So it's in their best interest to get that level of exposure. Eventually, the exposure will be a lot more widespread, but where we are in our business now, this is the best way to give a direct benefit quickly.
So do you have tech transfer offices and universities reach out to you then to list that IP on your website? How does that all come about?
We have had a couple of tech transfer offices work with us to list IP, and that was when we were focusing on building out that repository. We pivoted to work on our workflow for the royalty contract purchasing, which we can talk about. And now that we've hammered that out, we're back to building out the repository for IP. And this is why. See, the way we structure our royalty purchase deals is that we syndicate them. So we're already reaching out to a lot of different potential investors to get involved in that funding. And as a result, we anticipate and also are dealing with initial questions around, well, what else? What kind of technology are we talking about? What's out there? And so this is a great way to double down on the effort to make sure that we have appropriate amount of assets within that repository.
So where do you see AI helping reduce bias or information asymmetry in patent landscapes?
Yeah. And again, I think this is on the investor, entrepreneur side, right? It's just understanding the IP, understanding what the patent covers. Look, we're not looking to replace anything, but what we're trying to do is create an entry point for investors. We think that the existing ecosystem is sufficient, and that what we're trying to do is create another opening into it. So this is a on-ramp into the ecosystem for those who are uninitiated, a low friction on-ramp, so that you don't have to maybe have a conversation with your in-house attorney first, or you can just browse and say, okay, and then you go and talk to your in-house attorney or your patent attorney, whomever is your consult, and dive deeper. But this is to get everybody more interested more readily.
Now, terms like NFTs and tokenization can sound abstract or speculative, and we hear those being thrown around all the time. They're in the news a lot lately. From your perspective, what practical role could tokenization play in IP management?
Yeah, and I think this is a really great question because NFTs have been associated with some things that are good
and some things that are not so good. Yeah, definitely.
Right? And we know when we first started thinking about NFTs, we're like, man, like these are just pictures. We see the potential for the technology to really be something more than that. But every technology goes through its stages, and so I think that the blockchain technology is going through its stage as well. And it was a first introduction to the public around this technology, but at its core, I think tokenization is a very natural use case for what we're trying to do. And what the NFTs do in our prototype marketplace is that they act as pointers for these, let's say, for example, royalty contracts. They are not actually the contract itself, but they are a good way to think about it is a receipt on a ledger. So they're placeholders, they're visible, and they are immutable, meaning that they are one of one. And that's our focus for why we use the blockchain. And we use the blockchain to scale what we're looking to accomplish. Initially, the way Brilliance works is that we will acquire a royalty stream and we will syndicate it and their funding, and then we will buy the royalty stream and own it. And that is something that we do off-chain. However, the vision is to get to a place where these transactions can occur on-chain. The NFT marketplace that we have today is a proof of concept of that idea to test out to see where the friction lies, how the workflow would look, and so forth. And we're mindful of considerations like regulatory and security and so forth. And so we are also working to develop a more secure marketplace using a secure token standard, which is a bit different than the NFT. However, the concept still remains the same. And I think so the focus should be less on NFT here and more on creating an immutable ledger. And that's their focus.
Very interesting, because I've worked with some companies that purchase royalty streams in the pharmaceutical space.
Yeah.
And I've not run across anybody going into tokenization, and it's a very long, drawn-out process. And what I hear is this is a lot more efficient, it's going to be a lot faster, a lot smoother for both sides, and also finding the right partner is going to be more convenient.
I think that's right. And I think when we look at, and this is something we talked about yesterday, when you look at where we are now, it would seem like a royalty purchaser and ourselves would be competing. However, we don't think that's actually the case. We're just at a stage now where we're assessing these assets for suitability for a scalable marketplace. And what we would see, and what we would hope to see, is other royalty providers would see this and find it as an opportunity for them to manage their portfolios using this marketplace. Because at the end of the day, the users, the purchasers on the other side of this marketplace would be these everyday investors that we're looking to bring into the fold. And that's where we think the real differentiator and the value starts to really lie. And that's where the accelerant comes from. When you get more and more people excited about these things, tokenization allows us to lower the unit cost by multiplying the number of units. And that's where you start to get hyperscaling. And that's where an innovation becomes a household name.
Yeah, very interesting. And kind of along those same lines, how might smart contracts then change the way that licensing agreements are structured or even monitored?
Yeah, no, I love this question because I think it allows me to point out that smart contracts in this context aren't the contracts that we're all accustomed to. I would look at them as rules for the token. And they're rules like, if token is in location A, do B. And so I'll give you an example. One of the things that we've innovated, a patent pending process we have, is directing payments off-chain to the token itself. So a smart contract would detect where a token sits, and then when a payment comes in, and we'll collect that payment and then provide it to whoever holds that token. So smart contracts are like programmable tokens, and the programs are really about how the token behaves on the blockchain in certain conditions. But it's not a legal contract. So the legal contracts that would most likely accompany these tokens would be off-chain, or they may be attached in some way, but they're not part of the token itself.
That's interesting. So I would imagine in some ways, too, it would be easier to monitor when payments aren't made, and maybe if there's certain types of breaches, depending. So it would be more beneficial for maybe a tech transfer office that doesn't have the resources to be able to monitor all their licenses and agreements, all their contracts, to see whether or not, a licensee is in default or not.
That's absolutely possible. But in addition to that, if you want to go big picture, if you're familiar with blockchain, there's a blockchain explorer, which allows you to see activity on blockchain and trend data. We're not proposing that we do this, but we're building an ecosystem. We would love for someone to come in and say, look at this trend data. Where is the innovation happening? And they can see where innovation is occurring, what type of innovations are occurring. This can help municipalities or governments know where to funnel funds, and where also to maybe double down on investment. And that's something that we think that the blockchain will enable. We really see this as making IP as ubiquitous as real estate.
Just to add to that, this is exactly what you were talking about before. This is the reason with the immutable ledger, it can trace everything for you. So that small TTO would be able to see where their funds, if they're coming in or not, and when it should be happening. All of that is right there for you.
Yeah, which, if you have a number of different licenses, your small office or even a large office, you might have hundreds of license agreements, and to be able to track that more efficiently is, highly beneficial for a TTO. So given all that and the potential here, what concerns do you hear most often from institutions when blockchain or DeFi enters the conversation?
Yeah, I think we hear the gamut, right? Especially when it comes to decentralized finance or DeFi and blockchain itself. And it comes down to, we hear some people who are more familiar, like, this is an excellent use case. This is ideal for these types of transactions. This is what makes sense, to concerns about regulatory hurdles or overall security. As we know, that blockchain is going through its growth, specifically when you think about things like digital currencies and security and those types of things are concerns that people think about. We think that most of our conversations that we have lean more heavily towards the buyer side of the assets, and understanding a bit more about how they would be able to purchase the assets and what that would look like. But we're getting to a place, and this is something that we're aiming to, where ideally, I talked about right now we're doing these transactions on paper, and that the marketplace is a proof of concept to kind of make sure that it works the way we want it to, and that we're building a secure token marketplace that's more compliant with SEC regulations and security protocols and things like that. I'm including like who's buying the assets and where the money's coming from, AML, KYC. These are all very important things that are top of mind for us. But we think that we'd like to get to a place where users feel comfortable putting their own assets up there, right? We'd like to get to a place where anybody who has an intellectual property, they have a patent or a license or a royalty agreement they'd like to sell, that they would come, set up a profile, and then be able to upload, set their price, upload. It's in some ways similar to an eBay type of scenario, but for these type of assets.
Just to add to that, what we're seeing, the biggest concerns are around compliance and control and governance, right? But those aren't concerns. Those are guidelines to help us develop the appropriate product. That's what we're doing, as Chris was just describing with the next marketplace we're working on. In addition, we're excited looking out for what's going on with the government. The Genius Act passed, and we're just got to have our fingers crossed that the Clarity Act can pass, and that will really help give us a clear definition on how to proceed appropriately moving forward.
Yeah, and absent that clarity, we generally default to a very conservative position. Definitely better safe than sorry. So that's why we have been moving at a deliberate pace to ensure that everything works out appropriately.
Now, you've talked about this a little bit, but I want to go back to it about Brilliance talks about making IP investable. What does that look like beyond traditional licensing or venture funding?
Yeah, and so we talked about it a little bit, but we aim at buying royalty streams. And I know that there are some other businesses out there that do this too. So it's not entirely novel, but I think when you look at the broad sector of technology that we've reached out to, it's not known in each sector. So I think in like pharmaceuticals, this is a bit more of a known practice.
Very known. Very well known. Yeah.
Known in energy too. But not so known in other tech sectors. And so with varying levels of penetration as far as what people know about it. But what we try to do is we are a little bit more sector agnostic. We have sectors that we focus in, like medtech, pharma, agriculture, emerging tech, infrastructure, and energy. However, what we try to do is we try to provide non-dilutive funding. And that is, of course, if you have a royalty stream where you're collecting like recurring royalties over time, we would buy out that agreement, of the economic interest of that agreement, leaving, of course, the core assets intact. And we could buy out a portion or all of it. And that's where we are now. And of course, when we apply it to scaling, that would be the same theme.
Well, I want to talk again about this tokenized IP, because I'm curious if you think that this could expand participation in innovation financing. And if so, what guardrails do you think need to exist?
Yeah, and we touched on this a little bit, but there's definitely regulatory considerations, right? And that's the one that, when Geoffrey was talking about our eye on current policies and making sure that we are in lockstep with them, that's the biggest piece. The other is asset vetting and quality controls. Like with any type of transaction, you're going to have to be able to make sure that it's good on both ends. We also spoke a little bit about who the buyers are and who the sellers are, and making sure there's clarity around that. And then valuation and pricing, right? That's going to be another piece that is that would need to have some clarity. And one of the things that we talked about is being able to tell buyers how risky we think an asset might be, right? So informing the buyer. So remember, our biggest theme here is bringing more innovation into the space, and we're mindful that like people don't know much about these assets. They're mystical, in some ways unknown. And this is something that we want them to feel comfortable. We want them to know what type of risk they may be taking. And one of the guardrails here is how much information does a user need to really understand what these assets are. And even when we talk to potential investors in our current stage, we are trying to gauge what is the appropriate amount of information that's necessary for a proper decision to be made.
Just to add to that, before we talked about the guardrails, we're really excited for the potential of the expansion. We really could see the opportunity for smaller investors to participate, maybe having smaller slices and diversified IP economics, as well as improve liquidity for the asset owners. So there's a lot of potential out there to broaden it to a larger group of people.
Yeah, definitely a lot of potential, as you mentioned, Geoffrey. But I'm sure you can probably appreciate, you've probably talked to people in tech transfer offices. I'm sure we'll have some listeners here who are understandably cautious listening to this conversation. Given that, where do you see low-risk entry points for experimenting with these AI or digital tools?
Yeah, I think for those that want to dip their toe in to what we're doing, we have some great tools set up. The first is, of course, the IP repository. It's very low risk, low lift. It's free. You give us a list of your patents, we'll do the rest of the work, we'll put it up there, and that's just going to get seen by whatever investors we work with. And they'll be using the AI tools to be able to search that. The next is that we have something called Connect. Now, this is something that we worked on a little while ago, but we pivoted to the royalty stream assets more recently. But we built out a platform for connecting people. So basically problem havers with problem solvers. It really looks like this. You log in, you talk about what type of technology you are working on or what you are looking for. And this also has an embedded AI in the background, and it matches you to someone else who is interested in the same thing you're interested in. The idea around this was that we were looking to solve this issue specifically for people looking for sponsored research. And it still exists, and it's a program that we would encourage if you wanted to get involved. to get involved at that point. It's beneficial in that it will solve the problem of trying to get visibility to other decision makers and sponsored research. But in addition to that, it gets you into our ecosystem.
So, Chris, are there some misconceptions out there that you think exist about decentralized technologies in the context of IP?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about NFTs.
Yes.
I mean, I can't, even myself, and we work with them every day, I still think of pictures when I think about them. So I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions, that NFTs are assets, and that they are placeholders. That's at least how we use them, and that's, in reality, that's kind of the best use for it. I think the other one we talked about is the smart contract. Look, we 100% think the existing ecosystem, contracting system works. That's not what we're looking to solve. So these smart contracts, like we spoke about before, they're just the programming logic behind the tokens themselves. It has nothing to do with the contract that's underlying the agreement or underlying the asset. And I think that those are probably the two largest misconceptions that we see. I think the third is that blockchain equates cryptocurrency, and that's not the case either. So it is true that you need a digital wallet to be able to transact on blockchain, but we transact using USDC, which is a stable coin. So basically one coin, $1. It's not a fluctuating currency, so there's no speculation on that end. That's not something that we've entertained. So that's also another misconception that people have, that they're intrinsically linked.
Well, all of this is happening quickly. There's a lot of change going on. So I'm curious, in 5 to 10 years, what do you think is going to look different about how IP is searched, evaluated, and transacted?
Can I share something really quick?
Yeah.
So my son, right, my oldest son, his name's Adrian. He asked me, like, "Hey, Dad, like, what do you do?" And so I was explaining Brilliance to him, and I said, "Look, we are trying to get people to invest in technologies more readily." And he's like, "So I really like robots. So can you teach me how to invest in robots?" And so I said, this is it's a 7-year-old kid, but it's a perfect way to boil down what we're trying to do and what we think 5 years looks like. And so 5-10 years from now, hopefully we're answering that question. You wake up and you say, "I want more robots." Well, I don't know. I don't. But if you want more robots, you say, "I want more robots. And where do I invest?" And you go and you find robot technologies and you invest in them. And that's something, and that goes to all technologies we want to see proliferate. If you want flying cars, if you want, water filtration, we would like to give you the opportunity to be company agnostic, technology first investment, and that's where we're aiming for. And the best way to do that, in our opinion, is to build an asset class around it.
So you can't leave us hanging. Did Adrian invest in robots? And, if so, how's that going?
He came downstairs with his wallet and he's like, "Look, like, well, could I give this?" And so we are working on teaching him how to invest. And that started that conversation. It's about a conversation about money. Not yet, but we will get there. And I told him that too. I said, "Look, we're going to work on some basics first. And then when we get there and when we have a robot for you to invest in, I will happily on your behalf, put a couple dollars towards it."
Hey, at least he's interested. He could have said, "Okay, thanks, Dad," turn around and ran outside. You know what I mean?
Exactly right. Yeah, I'm proud.
Yeah, you definitely should be. So what part of today's IP ecosystem do you think in 5-10 years is going to remain unchanged?
I think most of it's going to be the same. This is, and we recognize this, not that I would say that change is slow coming, but it's not entirely necessary everywhere. And then we're not trying to, change everything. We're trying to introduce more value. And I think that when you have more investors, you'll have more perspectives. People will have other ideas. They'll engage with the ecosystem in ways that are unique to them. And that's what we really want. And I think that's one of the biggest things about us about Brilliance is that we are about cross pollination. On the Connect site, if you have a technology in one sector, the AI will connect you to another sector that might benefit from your technology, kind of like a hardware store in orthopedics. Kind of the idea is like, well, there is something over here that could benefit over there. And if I can give a brief example, We talked to a company that had these shrimp shells, and they're using them to deliver fertilizers over, in a biodegradable way over time. But this has a potential pharmaceutical use too. And so, but this business wasn't thinking about that sector. I think that when we expand the ecosystem, we're going to see a lot of great ideas coming in, and that's change I can't predict, but I think will be welcome, and I think that we'll see a lot of people bring innovation in that way as well. But aside from that, I think that some of the things that we have are just going to remain. We're still going to need patent attorneys. We're still going to need contracting in that way. Deals are not cookie cutter. So all of these things I think will remain the same. But what I think and I hope changes is that and this is me going out there, but I really like to see rewarding collaboration for innovation as opposed to I know now we have first to file. We step first in an event, but really it's kind of like, what can we do to reward like larger innovation projects and push collaboration from that perspective, so that that siloing doesn't happen, and then we can really push the needle on innovation.
Just to add to that, he pretty much covered it, but trust and relationships are still going to be key, and that partnering is a human aspect, and then legal regulations will still need the courts and lawyers to take care of those deals.
So Adrian's robots aren't going to replace all the humans yet. So
he's not on the podcast, but yeah.
Yeah, well, he's thinking the right way. A lot of people are worried about AI robots taking over the world.
I know.
But I wanted to ask the two of you as the podcast comes to a close, if a tech transfer professional wants to stay informed about AI, blockchain, or digital ownership trends, what do you think they should focus on?
I think the information itself is decentralized. And so my recommendation is just subscribe to our newsletter. And what we do in that newsletter is that we provide an overview of all these sectors and we provide pointers. So if you are interested in following one of those threads, sit down and you can build out your own, you could build out your own feed if you want to. But I think the best place, if you're new to this and you just want to get some information, some introduction, the newsletter is the best place to start, and then you can branch from there.
Geoffrey, anything you'd like to add?
In general, knowing that there's fundamental foundations with AI, and just knowing the basic tools that you would need, AI summary of their intellectual property opportunities out there. And I've heard a lot of it during this conference. You hear them mentioning a lot of it. And that's a safe place to start before you go into using it to achieve certain goals. But gathering the information is a good place to start.
Well, thank you both, Chris and Geoffrey. This has been a fascinating conversation. Brilliance is definitely on the cutting edge, and really enjoyed having an opportunity to talk with both of you today.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
the pleasure's all ours. Yeah, thank you.
Chris and Geoffrey, thank you so much for being willing to explore some really big ideas with us today. Whether or not every institution is ready for tokenization or decentralized finance, conversations like this push all of us to think critically about how IP systems evolve. For our listeners, we'll include links in the show notes to learn more about Brilliance and the tools Chris and Geoffrey are building. If this episode sparked questions or debate, we'd love for you to share it with your colleagues or continue the discussion in your own office. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Autumn on the Air.
Thanks for listening to Autumn on the Air with Lisa Mueller. Get social with us and share your thoughts. You can tweet us at AUTM or visit us online at AUTM.net. We'll be back next week on the air. Be sure to join us.